generation.
Dates in the Bible don't quite match the marriage certificate. Uh-oh.
And welcome, America, to America's family history show, Extreme Genes, and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. I'm looking forward to talking to Scott Rail coming up here in about 10 minutes. He's with Stories Behind the Stars, which is an organization put together by a Utah man a few years ago to document the stories of the 400,000 plus Americans killed in World War II. And recently, Scott was involved with finding a photograph, the last one needed to complete photographs of every American in a cemetery over in Europe. You'll hear the whole story coming up here in just a little bit. Hey, if you haven't signed up for our weekly Genie newsletter yet, please do so, and you can get the links to past and present shows and links to stories you'll appreciate as a genealogist and a blog from me each week. We'd love to have you. Just go to extremegenes.com or our Facebook page to get signed up. Right now, it's time to head off to Boston, where David Allen Lambert is standing by, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. Hello, David.
I am telling you, the 1950 census keeps on getting more and more fun responses online. I love to hearing all the stories that people are telling about it.
It's amazing how many things people are finding right now. I had an interesting experience this past week, though. I had some friends in who were visiting us, and we were talking about what we talk about a lot, David, eBay finds.
Oh, yeah.
And he was fascinated by that. We came back to the house. We'd been chatting in the car, and I pulled out an album that had some of these things that I'd picked up on eBay relating to my ancestors and the family. Okay. And he was quite amazed, and he immediately grabbed his laptop, flipped it open, and started going through there. And the wives were preparing dinner, and all of a sudden he says, "That's my dad." And
on eBay.
On eBay, yep. And we all gathered around, and it was a press photograph from 1933 of his dad and another man as they were preparing to go out for a debate competition in another state representing their college. And,
wow.
Yeah, and for $20 he was able to pick this thing up, but he was quite emotional about it. And then he said, I had an uncle who was a boxer, and found his uncle on the cover of a boxing magazine from 1943. So it was unbelievable. I don't know if we call that beginner's luck or what, but nonetheless, it really goes to show that your odds are better than you think when it comes to finding stuff on eBay.
I think that just putting in the search and saving the search really becomes your own family history eBay personal shopper.
Yeah,
because you
that's
can
right.
Find stuff on, especially on common relative names. If you're collecting and you're doing a one name study, it's perfect for that. It'll spend all of your dollars quickly.
You're absolutely right about that. And then, of course, this past week, we talked about it last week a little bit, Ancestry DNA has just come out with this amazing way to separate the two parents when it comes to your ethnicity. And
it has been wonderful. I've enjoyed so much going through all the tests of all these different relatives. My half-sister, I can see clearly her Eastern European connections versus my mother's English connections. Even with my wife, I was able to pair what she got from her dad versus her mom. Now, her mother's dead. Father hasn't tested, so I had an uncle test, and it works perfectly to do this comparison.
Isn't this amazing? And you don't have to have the parents test to do this, which is the way it used to be up until now.
Oh, that's true. And I really have to say that I've had a lot of people on social media say, well, that would be great, but my parents aren't alive. I'm like, you don't need your parents on this one.
That's why it's so cool. Mm-hmm. Absolutely amazing. And the best news yet is that in time, we're going to be able to see, hopefully, a separation of mom's side and dad's side in our DNA matches, and that can be a game changer for a lot of people.
Wow. It's come a long way from that initial blood test where you got your DNA results, a number of years ago.
Right.
We're really still at the tip of the iceberg.
And speaking of ancestry, of course, the 1950 census is adding new states and territories all the time that have been indexed. And this week, they've added the islands of Canton, Midway, and Wake Island to go along with Alaska, Delaware, Guam, New Hampshire, Panama Canal, Vermont, and Wyoming.
Wow, they are really coming a long way quickly. And I know there's still a lot to do, but
Yeah.
I'm really excited about these new states.
Good stuff.
Well, speaking of things like eBay, well, this wasn't really eBay, but this is a high auction catalog of coins that went up, and this included a medal that was struck in gold back in 1839 to replace a previous one that was given to Revolutionary War hero Daniel Morgan. He was the hero of the Battle of Cowpens, and his military strategy is still revered by many military historians. Well, this metal fish sold this week for $960,000.
Wow. That's amazing.
And one of the original ones was actually lost. In fact, J.P. Morgan, the great 19th century and 20th century financier, he actually thought he was related and acquired the metal at one point in time, then mysteriously got lost.
Oh, boy.
Because he wasn't related to him. Well, it turned up now in the 21st century. I am just always amazed by technology that comes out, but I'm even more excited when we bring history to life. And if you have a connection with the Green Mountain Boys in Vermont during the Revolution, there's a new movie being filmed right now, right in Nantucket off the coast of Massachusetts, talking about none other than Ethan Allen. And I'm sure that you probably have some Vermont Revolutionary War connections with your Connecticut connections.
Actually, I have a Vermont connection. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And it was a great uncle whose name was Eli Noble. He was an officer, and he was in the Battle of Bennington. And then his brother was my ancestor, and he may have been in the Green Mountain Boys too. I'm not sure on him. But yeah, there's a big connection there, and it was an amazing story, of course, because Vermont didn't even become a state right away.
No. In fact, they have a 1791 census, not 1790.
Right.
Well, that's what I have for Beantown this week. And don't forget, if you're a member of NEHGS, you won't need this code, but if you're not, use the code EXTREME on AmericanAncestors.org and save $20 on membership.
All right, David, thank you so much, and we'll catch you at the back end of the show. And coming up next, we're going to talk to Scott Rail from Stories Behind the Stars. Recently, he was instrumental in recovering the only known photograph of a soldier who died in Europe back during the war. We'll tell you the whole thing coming up in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show.
Unknown parentage, lineage society membership, building your family tree, leaving a legacy. Regardless of your reasons for hiring a professional researcher, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you discover your family's past. Their genealogists are highly rated in their field with specialties in DNA analysis, historical context, and forensic genealogy. For nearly 20 years, Legacy Tree Genealogists have created thousands of professionally bound and digital reports for families like yours around the world. So whether you've hit a brick wall in your research or are just getting started, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you tell your story and preserve it for generations to come. To receive a free estimate for professional research, visit legacytree.com or call 1-800-818-1476. That's 1-800-818-1476. We'd be happy to talk to you. Legacy Tree Genealogists.
Hey Genies, Ancestry now has an exclusive partnership with PhotoMine, the leader in photo scanning and archiving. What does this mean to you? Well, imagine inheriting an old photo album and you want to digitize all the images. Up until now, you'd have to remove the pictures, place them in a scanner, crop them, and perhaps use Photoshop to improve them. Now, by using these amazing PhotoMine tools from Ancestry, you can use your phone to take a picture of an entire page from your album. The tools will automatically separate and crop each picture, improve focus, and restore color or colorize your images. Then you can assign which picture goes to which person on your tree. If you've been waiting years to get around to the tedious project of scanning your old albums, it's been worth the wait. No more pulling your photo albums apart and trying to reinsert the pictures back in proper order. No more tearing of your old photos while removing them from those so-called magnetic albums of the 1970s. Sign in to Ancestry through their mobile app to try it out. Hey Genies, it's Fisher here, and my shiny new ExtremeGenes.com website has been described as having that new car smell. I love hearing that. Having been with you for over 8 years now, it felt like time to help out listeners and followers who need to know the basics of genealogical research, as well as how to understand your DNA test results, and to be able to put them to work for you, breaking down brick walls, identifying birth parents, locating new cousins who may have photos and information that can't be found anywhere else, and verifying your paper trails. Yes, DNA can do all that, and I can show you how. Check out the all-new ExtremeGenes.com website and download the free Genealogy Strategy Roadmap and the free DNA Starter Guide. Then, if you like what you see, you can take those next steps to sign up for the video courses that you can watch at your leisure. I'll take you through all the basics, step by step. Find out more now at ExtremeGenes.com. And welcome back to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth. Well, over the last couple of years, I've had a great guest on named Don Milne. He's a Utah man who started an organization called Stories Behind the Stars. And his goal was to get a biography and hopefully a photograph of every American service person killed in action during World War II. We're talking about 400,000 service people. And as a result, volunteers stepped up from all over the country. They've been making tremendous progress with that. And my next guest is one of those people. His name is Scott Rail. He's a Virginia man, a former serviceman himself. And Scott, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So what brought us together was this story that came out just a couple of weeks ago about the Netherlands American Cemetery and Memorial overseas. And they display photographs of service members buried over there. And they've actually put together an entire group of them from Nebraska. They had 102 people there from Nebraska, 101 photographs. And the only one that was missing was that of a man named Doral Bundy Elliott. He joined the Army in Lincoln, Nebraska back in 1942. He was killed in Germany in 1945, the last year of the war. He was a technical corporal, 29 years old. And when they couldn't find that final photograph to put this whole thing to work, well, they turned to Scott Rail with Stories Behind the Stars. And Scott, tell us how this all came together.
Thank you. So when I started with Stories Behind the Stars, I was honored to be essentially their European face of the organization. And as a chief component of my contribution, I partner with various organizations overseas, particularly in Europe. And in this case, we're talking about the Fields of Honor Foundation, who has a program called the Faces of Margraten. Mm-hmm. Margraten is the name of the town that the Netherlands American Cemetery is in. There are 10,023 service members represented in the Netherlands American Cemetery. A little over 8,000 of them are physically interred there, and a little over 2,000 of them are represented on the walls of the missing, so they have no physical remains of them whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And the goal is to put a picture on their graves or next to the wall every other year to essentially add substance to the sacred space that people have been essentially going on a pilgrimage to for all this time.
Yeah, well, bring them to life, right? I mean, it's just not stones. It shows a person.
Yeah, I mean, they say a picture says 1,000 words, and, I never really understood that until I got into this. But it's incredible how much you can gain from looking at an image of an individual that mostly forgotten.
Sure. Well, you obviously now had the name of this one soldier, Doral Bundy Elliott from Lincoln, Nebraska. And that, that's kind of an assignment, isn't it, soldier? I mean, you have to go out and you have to find that picture. What did you do? What was your process?
Well, I had a different process. I intentionally put off Mr. Elliott for some time because they put out a couple different materials to help those of us who engage in this with the Margraten Cemetery. And there was a big hole in the middle of the country. And my goal was to expand that hole to show obvious evidence of growth. And that hole was not over Nebraska. So it took me almost 8 months to get to Mr. Elliott. So I finished all the soldiers in Utah, Idaho, Nevada, and then I started to push out further, and I finished all the soldiers in Montana, Wyoming.
Wow.
And I finally got to Iowa And Doral was actually born in Iowa. And so that's when I started looking for him there.
Okay.
But I found a repository very unique to Iowa, a bonus program. A lot of states had them at the time, but Iowa was very unique in how you filed to receive the additional bonus for soldiers who didn't come home. And you had to file paperwork, and there was a lot of photos involved. So I closed Iowa because I think there were 5 or 6 soldiers left in Iowa.
Okay.
And I closed them in 48 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, it was incredible. I've never heard of anything like that. But they didn't have anything for Doral. So it appeared that he was born there and very quickly moved on before history could capture a footprint of his existence. But I was already in Iowa, and I was in that neighborhood, and I finally got to Doral because he was the last one in the state. And in the amount of progress that the community feels when an entire state is done is incredible. So I put out some feelers months ago because I met some people through the Battle of the Bulge Association. And I knew I wasn't ready to be in Nebraska, but they're from Nebraska. And they were absolutely critical to this entire search. They were able to determine that Doral was actually best considered to be a resident of Colorado than any other state.
Okay.
Regrettably, he was from a very rural place. But by the time I got to it, these same people from the Battle of the Bulge Association, my dear friends now, sent me unexpectedly a newspaper from 2016 called the Lincoln Star, I believe, did a profile on a soldier in another American cemetery in France. And so I reached out to them, and with them, we were able to find a lot of the different key people, map the family, and really make this a success.
Yeah, and this is really fun, too, because as a result of this, it went from one cousin to another until finally you wound up with one of the people who had a box of photographs. And there it was at the bottom.
Yes, that was absolutely incredible. The reporter I was talking to found this individual. I knew the region that they were in. I couldn't find a family member there, but this reporter did. It got us connected. This guy has become essentially the family historian, as members of the family tend to do. And he put me on it. He gave me some ideas. I was looking all over Denver for some relatives, and he was looking for some others. He said he was going to visit some people over the weekend, and he'd get back to me. I didn't know until the story came out that this beautiful man drove 200 miles on the off chance that a direct relative, in fact, of Mr. Elliott's, because this person was ailing in health, and they needed help to look through everything. And just almost randomly, they found it in some random box, and I was blown away.
Well, and the picture, amazingly, had his name written on the back with his birth and death date, killed in World War II. I mean, this is really what you always hope for. I cannot tell you how many people I run into over the years that have a whole collection of photographs, and none of them are marked. And then I was going through one of my own photo albums the other day and realized how many pictures of my own from 30, 40 years ago I have that are not marked. And it's like, okay, we got some work to do here, people. But in this case, this is real fortunate because really there don't appear to be any other photographs of this man.
That is correct. As I understand it, during that period of history, there was a paper shortage. So a lot of yearbooks in a lot of states were never created. So a lot of the typical ways you would find a person of this age in that time of history, they're just not there, particularly in rural America. It's very, very uncommon in some places.
Sure. So once you got a hold of the picture, now we're talking about Bruce Courtney here. He's the one who kind of got things together and traced down the family member who had the picture. He scanned that for you. What was that feeling at your place when you finally got this image you'd been looking for so long?
Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. I just come off of the most successful month of my profession as a repatriation specialist. I closed 4 states in 1 month, and I got 4 or 5 people from Colorado in that same month.
Wow.
I don't know of a single other person that's closed a state. There may be one. I don't know. but words can't describe how unbelievable that experience was. And then to read the story and find out some of the details about how he got it that he didn't even think to share, because it didn't mean anything to him. He was as much on a mission as I was, as the reporter was. It was so incredible that, some of those details, he didn't think to mention them, because I don't think they meant anything to him. He was just so honored to be a part of this discovery.
Isn't this funny when we get onto a passionate project like this, how the water will flow downhill because you will find somebody else is going to step in and help you out with what you don't have, and what they don't have, they'll find somebody else. And pretty soon you got all these heroes all the way down the line. And you being a former serviceman, you must obviously relate to these guys and for what they went through. Do you know much of his history, Darrell Elliott's?
I really don't, and that's really unfortunate. It's a double-edged sword. Sometimes, it's so important to me to get these photos and get them in the system and to spread out the historical footprint of these individuals, that the faster I find one, in some ways it's very sad because I don't get to know that personal story as much, because I have 1,600 other photos to find for that one cemetery, but I work with many other cemeteries. I found thousands of photos for various cemeteries at this point. The longer I'm dealing with a story, sometimes I'm very grateful to go through the struggle, because I'm forced to know every little detail as I map a family through various different states. In Nebraska, it can be very tricky. I mean, a lot of these individuals during this time are children of the Dust Bowl.
Yes,
and
that's right.
If you're dealing with the Dust Bowl area, these folks can jump 5 states in 6 months. Very suddenly, they just disappear and reappear. And a lot of times you don't really know if it's the same person.
Sure. Absolutely.
So it's very tricky. It's very, very tricky.
We're talking to Scott Rail. He's with the organization Stories Behind the Stars, tracking down the photographs and biographies of the 400,000 Americans killed in World War II. Obviously very passionate about what he does. Scott, let's talk more about the organization and some other projects you're involved with when we come back, okay?
Okay.
When we return in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. All right, back with my special guest, Scott Rail from Stories Behind the Stars on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. Fisher here. And Scott, it is so great to be talking to you. Stories Behind the Stars, for people who aren't familiar once again, is an organization that was put together by Don Milne in Utah to get the histories and the photographs of the 400,000 Americans killed in World War II. And he asked for volunteers. We did a volunteer push on this show a couple of times, and Scott Rail is one of those people who has stepped up. And Scott, how did you get involved with Stories Behind the Stars?
I was actively working to get into the greater space of what I call the field of remembrance, with a focus on the military story and the narrative of those who didn't return.
And then, since you were a serviceman yourself, may I ask where you served?
Well, I was a serviceman of 20 years, so I've served in a lot of places, but I've been to Europe and the greater Middle East region, Asia. I've lived in Africa for a little bit, so I've been a little bit everywhere.
Wow, sure sounds like it. But of course, as a result of that, you can certainly relate to these guys and probably more than anybody appreciate their history.
I certainly feel like it. I feel like I'm continuing my service through passionate employment to the force.
Mm-hmm. So give us a couple of stories that particularly impressed you that you've discovered along the way. I'm sure they're all incredible, but there have to be a few that just stand out in your mind.
There's so many that stand out, but one of the longest guys I've ever looked for when I started was Haskell Sexton, and he was a very confusing individual because he crossed state lines so many times. I'm certain he was a Dust Bowl child because he starts off in Oklahoma, and then he was in Hawaii for a bit, not in the service, but ended up in Idaho, Utah, Nevada, but he enlisted in Nevada, and he was the last guy of Nevada.
And so what did you learn about him, and how did you find him?
Oh, he was really troublesome. I called him Rascal Sexton for a long time. He was very troublesome. I'm not really sure why he moved. I mean, that was a part of his story that I never understood. But thankfully, due to Ancestry.com, Family Search, and various different things like that, I was able to track down living members of his family, which was really, really surprising. Usually that's not terribly difficult, but in his case, it was terribly troublesome because there is no Sexton in the family now. They're all of a different name.
Sure.
And he was a real bear. I actually thought that I was going to find him because I knew he was a barber and he worked in a barber shop. And I found out the barber shop, and the social center of many towns, in the 30s and 40s was the barber shop.
Right.
So I thought that my one chance was going to be finding a reporter taking a picture in a barbershop, which I thought would be pretty typical of the times. And then I heard he had a receding hairline. There were a couple identifying characteristics. And I thought I was going to pull him out of a barbershop, but I actually ended up finding a family member, and they had photos. But then it morphed into this bigger story because I found a newspaper clipping of the 4 men of Elko, Nevada, who met on the battlefield. I think it's how it was titled, this piece. And I was like, oh my gosh, these 4 guys all knew each other. They all got together. They're in totally different units. They found out where each other were, or they were stationed briefly with each other. And I thought for sure that there would be some sort of photo to commemorate the event of these 4 men, that they would have had someone take a photo. And I actually got a press story in Elko. The local press were very, very helpful, but I wasn't able to find that photo. But I found photos of all those 4 individuals, and I talked to almost all their families. And it was a very, very interesting process.
Wow. Yeah, and I'm listening to this, and of course, this is how family historians, genealogists do their work. You pick it up, you follow the lead, you make phone calls, you email people, maybe you write them even a physical letter at some point. Have you had to do any of that yet?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I've done all of that. Regrettably, and thankfully for this experience I'm having with you now, a lot of people regrettably think that there's a lot of scams in the world, and I understand that. And I understand someone calling, talking about a relative that you may not even know of.
Sure.
That died 80 years ago. People, they get nervous about stuff like that sometimes, and I have some very weird reactions from people, which is unfortunate, but I understand.
So writing them a letter is a good way to let them know you're the real deal.
Some of them have required it. I don't think that that's the best way. I mean, at this point, you can literally Google my name, and
sure,
stuff comes up now, and I try to encourage that. But some have been very, very assertive about they want an actual letter, and then they give me their address, and now I'm like, well, if I was a scammer, why would you give me your address? I'm very confused.
Good point. So you've closed out all these states where you've actually obtained photographs of all the remaining veterans killed in action in World War II in those states. What are you working on now?
Well, I talked before about how I was trying to expand this hole in the country, the search map that we have as a tool. I'm trying to punch through the southern border. So I'm finishing up Colorado. I'm hoping to close New Mexico in the next week or two. And then a very interesting subject of Native American soldier during the 30s and 40s. The historical footprint is not good on a lot of folks in that particular group. I've actually been after him for 7 or 8 months now.
Wow.
But I've identified family members, and they're semi-responsive.
Well, that's hopeful then, isn't it? And how many more do you have to go in that area?
Off the top of my head, I have 6 in New Mexico, I think 9 in Arizona. There's about a dozen in Colorado. I'm skipping over Denver, but everything outside of Denver, because I have people in Denver, and I'm hoping they'll look into that for me. But I just want to punch this hole into the southern border and expand the search materials and the tools that they give us. And hopefully that'll inspire other people to see, wow, we are making a difference.
Wow. So when you look at the map that the organization must make available to you, where you can actually see these holes, what are you finding? I mean, at this point, they must have a total out of the 400,000 where they've completed how many?
Well, I'm talking, to be clear, about the Faces of Margraten specifically at the moment. The last update was 1,594 soldiers still remaining.
Okay. But in the United States, out of the 400,000, how many have been completed with the entire organization? Do you know?
I don't know. I know that we have some very active teams because we organize typically by state.
Okay.
And we have some very robust teams. My focus is largely on building the connections to European organizations and finding other, essentially marketing to Europe to draw in volunteers. I do not know the exact number off the top of my head. I wouldn't even want to guess.
Right. I got you. Well, that's a massive project. I have no idea. I know that Don has been very excited about the growth of the organization and how many that you've been able to put to bed already, which is an amazing thing. Hopefully, this is going to go on only a couple more years because everybody will complete what needs to be done. But you are kind of in a race against the clock.
That's absolutely true, but I wouldn't say that this will ever be complete because, as you know, they call it history. They don't call it facts. So the story is never complete, and I just hope to build super viable products for others to add to is my largest goal.
Wow. Well, it's great. He's Scott Rail. He's with Stories Behind the Stars, an organization devoted to memorializing the more than 400,000 Americans killed in World War II. And Scott, amazing stories, amazing things that you're doing. God bless you in your efforts, and much success.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Thank you.
And coming up next, David Allen Lambert is back for another round of Ask Us Anything when we return to Extreme Genes in 3 minutes on America's Family History Show. Genies, if you haven't done so yet, you've got to check out Ancestry.com's new storytelling creation center, Ancestry Stories. Their story builder allows you to create a story with 6 different slide types, including a title page, a photo display page, including stock pictures they provide, and documents. And you can write a summary. And with those photos, you can add motion, panning left to right or right to left. For now, these stories can only be created on your iPhone, but Android is still to come and can be saved to your ancestors' pages on your trees. You can then access via phone, and in time, it'll appear on your desktop. You can also share it with family members and friends, whether or not they subscribe to Ancestry.com. For the younger generation that wants stories in a quick and easy-to-consume form, you can't beat this. I've already shared a story with my family, and the reactions are remarkable. Try out these incredible new tools and share your new story creations on social media using hashtag #MyAncestryStory.
Unknown parentage, lineage society membership, building your family tree, leaving a legacy. Regardless of your reasons for hiring a professional researcher, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you discover your family's past. Their genealogists are highly rated in their field with specialties in DNA analysis, historical context, and forensic genealogy. For nearly 20 years, Legacy Tree Genealogists have created thousands of professionally bound and digital reports for families like yours around the world. So whether you've hit a brick wall in your research or are just getting started, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you tell your story and preserve it for generations to come. To receive a free estimate for professional research, visit legacytree.com or call 1-800-818-1476. That's 1-800-818-1476. We'd be happy to talk to you. Legacy Tree Genealogists.
Hey Genies, as we've dug into our family history explorations over the past year, our community at Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies has taken off. This is where you can meet like-minded genealogists who can help you break through those brick walls and find a whole city behind it, occupied by ancestors whose names you don't even know yet. This is where you can learn from your fellow genies and ask questions, because many in our community have already been into some of the records you're looking for. Genealogy and and Breakthrough Strategies is free. What a great place for brainstorming and getting to know other people who totally get your passion for family history research. If you're looking to take the next step in sharpening your skills, here's a great chance to learn from others and give back in areas you've already become expert in. So join us. That page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. It's a long name, but we cover a lot of territory. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. All right, we are back at it. It is time for Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's family history show on extremegenes.com. Fisher here. David Allen Lambert is back from NEHGS. And Dave, our first question comes from Mercedes in Rio Rancho, California. And she writes, David and Fisher, thanks for taking my question. My father was adopted and DNA matches are showing me his grandparents, but I'm having a hard time figuring out which of their children are his parents because there are several children in both families. Do you have any suggestions? Wow. Yeah, you know, this is the kind of thing that a lot of people run into periodically, and you narrow it down perhaps to one person or another person on both sides. But the best thing is to understand that, first of all, you want to look at your matches and see if you have somebody who's, say, a first cousin or a half first cousin. A half first cousin would suggest to you that you share one grandparent, because I'm assuming if your father was adopted, then his parents perhaps were not married at the time. Maybe they were. Maybe you can find that there was a child of one set of grandparents who married the child of another, and they gave this child up, gave up your dad. If that doesn't work, then you have to start going to the process of elimination. And Dave, this can be a really challenging thing, don't you think?
It really does. And you have to get out that old Excel spreadsheet, or maybe even use DNA Painter to kind of jump in. Johnny Pearl's product is great for narrowing things down.
I've seen occasions where what you have to do is you go through, say there was a family of 7 kids, and there were 3 boys and 4 girls or something like that. Then what you want to do is you want to go through and start figuring out, all right, did any of these children die before my dad could have been conceived?
Right.
Were any of these children living 1,000 miles away at the time my dad was conceived?
Or we're too young to be the parent.
Yeah, or we're too young to be the parent, something like that. You can then really start to narrow things down. Or perhaps were some of them married and in a very, very stable relationship, and it's really not likely that this person was the father or the mother of your dad at that time. I mean, there are various things that you can do to try to narrow this down. Was one of the sons off in the military at the time your dad would have been conceived? In this case, the conception date is actually more important than the birth date. And so just back time it 9 months from the time he was born and kind of figure that out. The other thing that you can do, and having gone through this very scenario, by the way, with a couple of other people, I've found that if you can find people who descend from these other children, then perhaps they can answer some of those questions for you. And potentially you can find somebody willing to take a DNA test so that you can eliminate somebody as the potential parent of your father. We found somebody in one of these cases who was over 90 years old, and his son was happy to help out, got dad to do the test. And based on the distance of relationship between my friend and this man, we figured out then that his mother could not have been the mother of her father. And so, you know, you have to start going through these things and eliminating them. But I'll tell you, when we did this, we were able to narrow it down to one person who was the mother and 2 brothers who were likely the father. And in this particular case, we were never able to separate the 2 boys. Now, we found one, though, that was married shortly before her dad was conceived, and then he was divorced shortly after her dad was born. And he lived just a little over a mile away from this woman. So while theoretically the younger brother could have been the father, this other one is the one she looks at and says, yeah, that's got to be the guy. And there's nothing more we can do with it because he didn't have any children. He doesn't have any grandchildren. So we weren't able to do any further DNA testing as a result of this whole thing. So that's kind of what you have to do. And sometimes, unfortunately, you can't get the answers 100%, but I wish you the best of luck with that. It's not an uncommon problem. And thanks for the question. And coming up next, we'll take another question about coats of arms when we return on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show in 3 minutes. All right, here we go. Final segment this week on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. We're doing Ask Us Anything. And David, our next question comes from Ryan in Deerfield Beach, Florida. And he says, guys, I know for sure that my second great-grandfather had a Scottish coat of arms. He told me about this when I was a young boy. How do I find out more about this? Good question.
Ooh, well, a coat of arms is always a sticky wicket because it doesn't necessarily mean that the coat of arms for one name is applicable to all. But there is hope. For Scotland, there actually is an office, an official government office called the Court of the Lord Lion.
Oh, I like that.
Of Arms. And I've been there. It's in Edinburgh.
Really?
And they have all of the registered coat of arms since 1672.
Wow.
That are arms that were lawfully born. And the way it works with a coat of arms is, someone had to perform a heroic deed back in the day, and then they had that coat of arms awarded to them. Or that somebody had a notable achievement, or they achieved some rank in the government under the royalty to be given a prominent position, or then hence bear a coat of arms. Now, just because I have the last name Lambert, for instance, I'm not entitled to all of the coat of arms by the name of Lambert. I can't say, oh, that's a pretty one, I'll put that one on my stationery. You actually have to have the ancestor who originally was assigned the coat of arms. You don't have to have the same last name. In some ranks, they do want you to bear the coat of arms of your surname, so it would be the male son directly descended back from the armiger, which is the person who bore the arms itself. But, you can make inquiries. Like I say, the Court of the Lord Lion, King of Arms in Edinburgh, you can write to them. There's a great page on Family Search Wiki that explains how to contact them. And you can also see a variety of different websites. There's like the Peerage of Scotland and Ireland, and that's on Ancestry.com. That may help you. There's another one that's available, which is the Heraldry and Coats of Arms Resources to Help on Roots Chat, which has the Heraldry and Coats of Arms on rootschat.com.
Wow.
There's also the General Armory of England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales from the 1500s to 1800s, and that's on Ancestry. And if you're not done with that, there are 60,000 family coat of arms in the General Armory of England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, also available on, guess where? Ancestry.com.
Absolutely. These things are fascinating and they're interesting. And obviously they don't apply to most people living today. If they were earned, say, back 300 years ago or 400 years ago or something like that. But they're very interesting if you're writing a history or something like that. But to claim it as your own, and I don't even know that there's really much benefit to claiming it as your own anyway.
No, not unless you want a flag from your castle or, a banner from your Bentley as you drive it or your Rolls Royce. There's any variety of reasons to. If you're going to be jousting, you might want that on the pike that you're carrying into the battle, or, maybe your coat of arms will be emblazoned on the metal chest protector of your armor that you just had made up for your hallway. But a lot of people really are very much involved in that. NEHDS has a committee of heraldry, which has been on for over 100 years, and it's serious work, and we take into consideration the people that are researching their coats of arms. So there are people still very much involved in it, and of course in Europe it's even more important form of genealogical research.
Yeah, absolutely. So great question, Ryan. Hope that helps you out, and good luck in finding that coat of arms. And David, thank you very much. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right. Until then.
All right. And that's our show for this week. Thanks so much for joining us. If you missed any of it, of course, or you want to hear it again, catch the podcast version. We're all over the place. We're on iTunes, iHeartRadio, ExtremeGenes.com, TuneIn Radio, Apple Media. Wherever fine podcasts are found, you will find us right there. Talk to you next week. Thanks for joining us. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.